Did you ever wonder if Howard Hughes was actually living in that hotel room all those years? Could he have not been in there and maybe put somebody else in that room in his place? My guest tonight, Mark Musick, has a book on that subject. So in about 5 minutes, we're going to start talking about that. See you then. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong, up and down the state of California. So if you find that you need any paranormal help, give us a ring, shoot us an email, send me an IM on Facebook, shoot us an email at californiahauntsradio.com, and I'll get back to you and we'll make arrangements for that. I can honestly tell you that we just don't come out looking for ghosts. We come out to do a little debunking while we're out there. I know a lot of people hate that word, but I mean, we're looking for natural causes and stuff, so you will get a full service, because anything less is a disservice. Anyway, I want to welcome everybody and remind everybody that Saturday I'm teaching a Ghost Hunting 101 class starting at 11 a.m. Pacific, where I teach you how to ghost hunt. I've been ghost hunting for almost 20 years, so I've got a lot of experience. My team does. And, you don't have to do it our way all the time, but we found techniques that improve the quality of the EVP you get and the kind of evidence that you pick up. And you can even do this if you're with just friends and you're hanging out at some haunted location or some haunted hotel. I mean, we've even gotten great Class A EVPs with people in bars below us having parties or singing karaoke below us. That's what I'm going to teach Saturday. So just remember, and if you want to check that out, head over to the California Haunts Meetup page. It's simple, California Haunts Meetup. Anyway, we've got a great show for you tonight. Someone that's interested me for a long, long time. And for you guys that don't know about Howard Hughes, I'm going to let the guest explain who he was, and that way you can get a feel for him. But yeah, Howard Hughes was a unique individual, and I remember years ago he built this plane called the Spruce Goose, and it was an ocean-bound plane, big pontoons, and they had it down at Long Beach alongside the Queen Mary. And I remember going to see it there. Now I believe it's in Oregon somewhere, but yeah, the thing was huge, and he built this thing and it was made out of wood. And I think it only flew once, I think. I may be wrong. I think it only flew once, but it was different. Howard Hughes had a lot of money and he spent it the way he wanted to. Anyway, my guest tonight has a book out, and within the pages of this book, there's questions. Did Howard Hughes? Okay, let's put some background real quick. Howard Hughes lived in a hotel for years as a recluse, supposedly. But this book changes all that. It makes you look at the other side of this, in that Howard Hughes may not have been living in that hotel all these years. It was a double. And he was living on the outside, married, and just having a normal life. Is it possible? I think it's possible. He had a lot of money. He had the means to do it. He had the means to maybe get plastic surgery and change the way he looked and stuff. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that because I didn't write the book. Mark Musick wrote the book. And so I'm going to bring Mark on right now. Hello, sir.
Hello, Charlotte. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Very good.
Tell me about you.
I am retired military. I'm retired Major General. Was in the Air Force, and for 35 years. And actually, I got involved with this weird story that we're going to talk about tonight when I met a lady named Eva McClelland. Mm-hmm. And she told me a story. And I thought, this is craziness. This is lunacy. This can't possibly be true. Her story was that she was married to Howard Hughes. And I met her in January 2002. I knew her husband had just died about 2 months earlier. This would be November 2001. When she told me this thing, I said, Eva, Howard Hughes died 25 years ago. She said, that's what they want you to think. And she started telling me this story, that she met him in 1969, living in Panama. They were married. He was using another name. He was using a name of Verner Nicely, and he referred to himself as Nick Nickley to throw confusion every step of the way. They were married in May of 70. She began to put the pieces of the puzzle together. I'm married to Howard Hughes, and he's living under this other identity. And then he revealed it to her. And by then, she already knew it. And after that point in time that he revealed it to her, she could ask him any questions. She talked about the spruce goose. He didn't like the name spruce goose. She talked about flying the Hercules. Why did you do that? That was so dangerous. And he said, I did it because I was told it wasn't going to fly. So I made sure that it did. And he talked about his childhood, growing up in Texas. He talked about his parents. He talked about being in boarding schools, his parents dying young, his dad being in the oil business. All of the things that matches Howard Hughes's life. As I started researching this story, I found out what she was telling me was true. Everything that she was telling me made sense. It all brought the story together of the crazy, weird later life of Howard Hughes, where he was described in media as just long-haired, long fingernail, drug-addicted, bedridden, mentally incompetent derelict.
Mm-hmm.
That was a stand-in. Howard was living under another identity, hiding away with Eva McClellan.
Why would he essentially give up everything to live this other identity?
Well, that's a really interesting question because he really didn't give up everything.
Okay.
He basically hid under this other identity because the man was a very reclusive man.
Mm-hmm.
His last picture was taken in the early 50s, and that's his last official picture. He did not like publicity. He did not like notoriety, but he could never escape because of the things that he did, the aviation records that he set, the movies that he made, all of those things. He could never, ever escape. And so he found a way that he could escape and be comfortable in that very reclusive life that he wanted to live. And part of that was bringing another person in, this long-haired, long fingernail, mentally incompetent gentleman, bringing him in, throwing confusion into the whole situation, and then hiding with Eva McClellan, doing his business through aides. He had aides around him all the time until the stand-in died in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
The aides were always there doing business with him, interacting with him, and actually protecting him and Eva as bodyguards or as help with that. And then after 1976, once the stand-in died, the aides then disappeared, and Eva and Howard just hid away.
This is interesting. I mean, granted, he had the money to do that. I mean, like I said, he had the money. If he wanted plastic surgery, he could have done that. But I mean, he was he was recognizable, right? I mean, it's like Donald Trump trying to hide somewhere, you know.
Well, he was richest man in America, so he could buy anything that he wanted to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And he still kept access to money even after his death. How did he do this? He changed his looks. He whitened his hair. His hair was dark color,
Mm-hmm.
and he made himself blonde. He actually had an iris implant done, which was experimental when he had it done. But now you can change any iris about any color you want to. And he had an iris implant done, so now instead of being dark haired, dark eyed, he became blonde haired, blue eyed. And he actually had, I believe, some plastic surgery also, which changed some facial features. And that's why Eva didn't really recognize him initially,
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't really look like Howard in 1969, 1970 when they originally got together. But he always had these aides around him, always doing business, and would just disappear. He'd be gone, sometimes for months at a time. He'd just be gone. But they always got back together again. This is really a love story. She loved him, and he loved her. And this is really a love story, is what it turns out to be.
He's used to living in opulence. I mean, he can have anything he wants. any hotels. He build his own Trump Tower, his version of Trump Tower if he wants to, or whatever. How was he living during all this time?
Well, he bought in Las Vegas, he bought 6 hotels.
Mm-hmm.
He bought another one in Reno, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
He bought an airport. He bought TV stations. He bought massive acres and acres of land in Nevada. And so he had all of these material things, but he really wasn't a material man. Material things really didn't mean that much to him. Especially what meant a lot to him was being able to disappear. That's what meant a lot to him, to be able to escape. And when they moved into Alabama, their movement went like this. They met in Panama.
Mm-hmm.
In 1972, June of 1972, they moved to Arizona. And in Arizona, they lived in 3 places, one in Flagstaff, and then some time in Prescott, and then a time in Camp Verde. The aides are always with them throughout all of those times. In April of 74, they moved to Alabama. Now, Eva was from Alabama. She grew up in Alabama. And they went back to an area that was close to where she grew up, west of Troy, Alabama. The aides were again with them through this time. And they moved to a little house about 10 miles west of Troy, Alabama. I think it's Highway 29, about 10 miles west of Troy, Alabama, in a little house. The aides again were with them down the road about half a mile. And this is where the location where he actually told her, "I'm Howard Hughes." And she says, "Okay, I've already figured this out. I already knew that you were Howard Hughes." And this is where the aides were there to protect him, to help them communicate. Eva actually knew the aides were there to help him. And sometimes they would come and meet with him, and she'd say, hey, Nick, he went by the name Nick. "Hey, Nick, your buddies are out here. They want to talk to you." And then he'd laugh a little bit and go meet with them on whatever they wanted to talk about. But they lived very, 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 very hidden away in a small portion of Alabama. As I've gone and presented this story into Alabama, people of Alabama have said, if you want to hide, Alabama is the place to hide. This is the place to come do it if that's what you want to do.
This is all so incredible. I mean, like I said, he had the means to be refaced and all this and have this done. But I mean, how did the banks not catch on to what was going on when the money was moving around? I mean, it's one thing to sign the bills from Las Vegas, but it's another thing to sign and pay for stuff, land holdings and stuff via Alabama.
Well, what he had in Alabama was under another name, of course.
Okay.
And so that was all under another name. When the stand-in died in 1976, he had massive business interests out there in aviation, in oil, in hotels, massive business. Those just kept on going under the leadership and under the management of those people who were managing those businesses. So those businesses just kept on going. All he needed was a checking account, and he had one.
And what does she say he was like? I mean, what kind of person was he?
That's very interesting, because she described him as his personality could change very, very quickly. He could go from a very, very charming man to kind of a verbally vicious man. And so his personality would change. People have called it OCDC, I think it is, whatever those acronym is, obsessive compulsive.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people have called it. And there'd be times when she couldn't put up with him anymore, so she would just leave. And there'd be times that they'd be gone for 9 months at a time, 6 months at a time, 4 months at a time. And those would be the times, if you look in the books, where Howard Hughes would actually meet with the governor of Nevada, would be flying airplanes, would be meeting with some of his other business acquaintances. those periods when Eva left him matches the exact times that Howard would go have businesses, meetings. But they'd always get back together because he would have someone tracking her. He knew where she went. He knew where she was. And then we got to get back together again. I love you. I love you. We need to get back together again. And she'd come back because she loved him. She just enjoyed the guy. But there's years there that they lived very reclusive in Alabama on about 20 acres of wooded property in Alabama that got pretty lonely for her, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually went into Troy, Alabama and bought a house. She showed me the house. It was a very, very, very nice house. She showed me the house and she took Nick in to see the house. And he says, I can't live here. There's no way I can possibly live here. The roof is not safe. The roof is going to cave in. I can't live in a house like this. And she knew reason why he couldn't live there was because the people were too close. He didn't want to live with on a normal block where you have, a dozen houses. He didn't want to live there at all and actually interact with people because he could not risk being recognized. He just could not do it. And so that's why he had to stay on this wooded property, basically hiding away. And that's where he did stay until his ultimate passing in November of 2001.
How was she able to prove to you that it was him? Because I mean, did no DNA? None of this. It boggles my mind.
Well, that's real. Sure, that's really a good question because I didn't believe her for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to her stories, and I thought this can't be true. There's no way what you're telling me can possibly happen. It just can't. I didn't believe her. And during those 4 years, I started researching things. I went in and researched the identity that Howard took, a gentleman named Verner Nicely, and talked to family members of Verner Nicely. Actually researched his birth certificate. Mm-hmm. Again, everything Eva said was right on there. That was a man who was 5 foot 11 inches tall, born in Ohio, 1921, went into the military, left the Air Force in 1955, and went to work for the CIA in Panama. This man just disappeared. We really don't know what happened to him. So that's Verner Nicely there. So as I went and researched Verner Nicely, I found out again, it all fits. Everything that she said fits. And then she gave me actually military records, medical records, all the records that fit both Verner Nicely and Nick during a period of time that he was in the hospital, looking at these things. And then he also spent some time in the VA hospital in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. And we requested those records and got those records. Mm-hmm. And it says, where did you grow up? I grew up in Texas. He was still 72 inches tall. Howard at his height was about 6'4". Verner Nicely was 5'11". And so at the end of his life, he was still taller than the identity that he took. And so if you look at all of these things and put them together, the puzzle begins to become clear of what really went on here and the mystery that really went on here. Until you put it together. The thing that really, really hit me, this was I'd known Eva for 4 years. This was 2006. And I said, Eva, do you have any pictures of Nick? And up to this point, she had not given me any pictures. She said he never wanted his picture taken. Never, ever wanted his picture taken. She says, but I think I have a couple. I think I've got a couple. And so she started looking through her boxes because she was living out of boxes. The name of the book is Boxes, A Secret Life of Howard Hughes. She could not unpack. They had to be able to leave, so she lived out of boxes. She started looking through these boxes, and pulls out a couple of photographs of these 3.5 by 3.5 photographs taken early 80s of a man long ways away, way back in the distance. You couldn't really get anything out of it. You could see he was pretty tall. That's about all you could see out of these pictures. But I said, Eva, can I have these pictures? And she said, yes, you can have them. It was the same time I was talking to a detective in the Houston Police Department about this story. And I was going through my mind, is this real or is this not? And this detective told me, she said, if this lady Eva gives you things, it's real. If she never gives you anything to back up her story, it's not. Well, she gave me everything. She gave me absolutely everything that backed up her story, including military records, medical records, pictures, wedding certificates, everything that fit, she gave me.
This is like a spy novel. This is like something out of the movies, with where they find the guy's body floating and he's got the wrong ID, but he looks like the person in the picture, that kind of thing.
If you just look at it, it's kind of like we've been told year after year after year after year. Howard Hughes died in 1976. Mm-hmm. That's what we've been told. Howard Hughes died 1976. We've been told it many, multiple times. Mm-hmm. We believe it. That's what we believe. We believe what we're told. Well, in this case, it wasn't true. It wasn't true at all.
Wow. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around it.
Yes. Yeah, the other interesting thing about Howard is history says he had no children, mm-hmm. which wasn't true either. In the second edition of the book that we put out in 2016, 2 children came forward. One was a gentleman named John McDonald, and the other one was Cindy. And John, there's pictures of him in the book. John physically resembles Howard. If you put those 2 pictures beside each other, it's hard to tell the difference between these 2 gentlemen. And then you listen to John's story, and it all makes sense what went on there. Cindy's dad was Howard. Mm-hmm. And Howard actually interacted with Cindy under a couple different names, but actually interacted with Cindy. And so Howard actually interacted with all of his children. There's more than just the 2, but he actually interacted with all of his children throughout their lives and actually kept track of where they were. So we've got a very mysterious man here who wanted to hide, mm-hmm. had the money to buy anything he wanted, had the government contacts to get it all done, found a lady that loved him, that kept a secret, and he did it.
Well, it's not that far-fetched, though, because there's people that do this all the time. Like Olivia Newton-John's husband disappears. She has a big search for him. He's down in Mexico running boats, or whatever he was doing in Mexico. There's people that they find their cars by the side of the road. They think they've been kidnapped. They find them later. But it's just incredible that somebody in Howard's position, like you say, he did have the means. It's just like the whole thing with changing the eye color, the irises in the eye. I mean, it was experimental, but he had the money to pay for that experimental surgery to be done. I mean, it was a perfect setup. So
he also had many inputs, and he helped the CIA a lot. Mm-hmm. And he had many jobs that the CIA wanted done, which he went and did. One of them was the raising of a Soviet submarine that sank northwest of Hawaii. And Howard built the Glomar Explorer to go raise that submarine. And when we say in the book we speculated, well, we speculated. And so our speculation brings Howard took this other identity, this identity of Vernon Nicely, about the same time that he said, yes, I'll go raise this submarine for you, CIA. And what he think he did, this is our speculation, what he think he said was, CIA, you want us to go raise that submarine? I'll go raise that. You get me another identity.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they did, of another CIA operative who just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And then Howard also controlled and launched the CIA's communication satellites. So he could communicate the way he wanted to, and it could never, ever be traced. And that's why in the books say his telephone communications, they could never follow them. They could never be traced.
Mm-hmm.
Another advantage that your average citizen doesn't have if they're going out and hiding is being able to communicate in a way that no one can touch you.
Right.
And so he did have a lot of help, I must say, from the CIA in this. So he had a lot of government assistance in this also.
Mm-hmm. While you were saying that, I was thinking about Elon Musk with these rockets and stuff that he's building. I mean, that's what he's doing with communication satellites and all this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to disappear, but I'm just saying there's a parallel there, with
Right.
with the way he's spending money and stuff. This is plausible. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm a journalist, I have to look at all parts of everything. But it's just incredible, and it's just wow, if this is true.
I think there is. I think there's a connection here theoretically between Elon Musk and Howard Hughes. They're both genius men.
Yes.
They have all the money that you could ever imagine, and they're trying to use it for the right things. I believe. I hope that. The difference is that Elon kind of enjoys the media. I think
Mm-hmm.
he likes being out in the media and being in the limelight. Howard Hughes hated it. He did everything he could to stay out of the limelight, to stay out of the media. So that's kind of the difference in the personality between the two. But there's a lot of commonalities between those two personalities. Yes.
Yeah, there are. For man, I mean, then you got to wonder too. And I know, there's movie stars like this too, that they get into the business, and then suddenly it's, oh no, get the cameras out of my face, get this out of my face. Well, you got into a business where people are going to be seeing you and watching you. Unfortunately, you're stuck. I mean, that's what you chose to do. And for Howard, with his movies and whatnot, and being as bigger than life as he was, that's just expected. But I mean, if the guy didn't like the way he was living, if the guy didn't like that, that who are we to say it's a bad thing?
But yes, he made many movies. Movies was one in the 30s. Movies was a big deal, and so he got into the movies there in the 30s, and he got into aviation also, and would design airplanes, set records in airplanes. Very visible, very visible man. Buys a lot of TWA, and then he buys a lot of the hotels there in Las Vegas. So he does a lot of the things that he wanted to do with his money,
Mm-hmm.
but except he had to make sure that that visibility part wasn't really there. See, the other thing that happened to him in 1946, he had an aircraft accident, a very serious one, and got burned on a large percent of his body. His hands were damaged, his feet were damaged. He had some burns on his chest, on his back, things like that. This man, Vernon Nicely, Nick Nickley, Howard Hughes, his feet were damaged severely, his hands were damaged severely, his back was damaged severely. So he had the physical damage that Howard Hughes would have from that airplane. And people who met him personally attested to that. They said, yes, his hands were damaged, his feet were damaged. And they talked about his height.
Mm-hmm.
He's 6'4", talked about his height. He liked to talk about aviation. He was a very intelligent man, so he liked to talk about aviation to anyone who would listen at that point in time, out in the woods of Alabama. there'd be a few people that would be very interested in that, and there
Yeah, I
were.
would go along great with them. I love that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. They just really liked it. Those ones who he would allow them to get to know him.
Hmm.
Very few people actually got to know him because if someone came to visit Eva out in the woods of Alabama, he'd hide. He'd just hide. Would not interact at all. And Eva said there's times that he would just disappear. Don't know where he went. Don't know what happened to him. He'd just disappear in the woods there. One time he said, "Well, what have you been doing today?" And he said, "Well, I climbed up in a tree and I fell out and I was unconscious for a little bit." And Eva said, "I knew that wasn't true. I knew that was a lie." But it was his way of just saying, "Leave me alone. Just leave me alone. I'm going to do what I want to do."
That goes back to having money. He could have had the government build him a bunker back there too. Where he could go hide underground somewhere. I was probably one of the last few people that flew on Hughes Air West
Oh, cool.
before it shut
Okay.
down. But I remember flying, how impressed I was. I was only like probably 11 or 12, and I remember getting on the plane and I thought, wow, this is Howard Hughes' airplane.
That's great. Yeah, that was a good airline. It didn't last for long. It was a good
Yeah,
airline.
yeah, yeah. See, the story intrigues me because it's just fascinating. You hear these stories about these guys, and like even Elvis. You hear these stories about Elvis doing the same thing and taking off. And who are we to say it's not true? I mean, the people that know it's true are the ones that are the closest to them. Like you said, Howard had a handful of guys that he trusted, and they stayed with him, the whole time. It's
And
just
the aides were actually there in Alabama. Eva would see the aide. One time she was going into Troy, Alabama, and she had a flat tire on her car. And within about 2 minutes, there's someone who came up, stopped, repaired the tire, never said a word, and left. So she knew they were watching her very, very closely. One thing that I think he would tell Eva, you need to be careful because you could be kidnapped.
mm-hmm.
And he was worried about his family, his wife at that point, and I think his children too. That's why the children never got any visibility in the world, was because he was afraid that someone would kidnap him.
Sure.
And then want a ransom for them, which probably would be worrisome if you're the richest man in the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's incredible. I know the royal family puts any new member coming in, be it Meghan Markle or Princess Kate, they put them through kidnapping training, where they actually have their version of the Navy SEALs kidnap them,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trained how to behave during that. So I would think that maybe wealthier people do that with their families, but back then probably not. But I'm just saying, I would think, who knows? But yeah, anybody with that kind of money and that kind of visibility.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah. It just interests me. And how big a house was this that he was living in Alabama?
Oh, a very small house. There's a picture of it in the book. We went by and Eva showed it to me. It was probably 40 foot by 40 foot, something like that. Maybe
Whoa.
not even that much. And it was not in great shape. He would not let her have a TV. He said, there's nothing on TVs. There's no value there. We're not having a TV. And so they had a radio. And so when April 5th, 1976, when Howard Hughes supposedly died, they were listening to it on the radio. And the aides were down the road, about half mile down the road.
Yeah.
And they're listening to it on the radio. And Eva's comment is, the public's going to realize something is really strange in this because they're trying to get the body in the ground too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Howard says to Eva, you really know who your friends are when you fake your death and you see who shows up at the service. At the service, there's 23 people. There weren't any doctors there who taken care of him. There weren't any business associates. There weren't any aides. Mm-hmm. Nobody like that. There were 22 cousins, most of whom Howard hadn't even met. and the other one person was a CIA operative. They had a 4-minute service for him. Richest man in America has a 4-minute service and get him in the ground in less than 48 hours of his death. So they obviously wanted to get this body in the ground quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That became very, very evident. The reason why? It wasn't Howard.
Mm-hmm.
You better get it in the ground because it's not Howard at all.
Now, this double that he had, do you know anything about him at all? I mean, other than other than what we all know, that he had the long hair and all that.
What we know, what we have heard about him, we don't know exact details on him, but what we've heard about him is that he was a tall man, 6'4",
Mm-hmm.
and he was actually a friend of Howard's, and he was 20 years older than Howard. And so during that period of time, 72, 73, it talks about Howard Hughes looking 20 years older than what his age is. Well, he looked 20 years older because he was 20 years older. And this was the man who was declared mentally incompetent. He fell in a hotel room in England, and at that point declared mentally incompetent. And then from there, he was moved many different locations, ended up in Mexico
Mm-hmm.
in 1976. And then that's where the gentleman died as he came across. We don't know his name.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that Howard had other people who looked exactly like Howard, and he'd use them as doubles. So there'd be a meeting somewhere, and there'd be someone enter the back door, the back room, stand in the back of the room. Everybody look around. Well, that's Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes just came in. Of course, it was Howard Hughes's double.
Right.
And he'd turn around and leave, to cause probably confusion, which is what he loved to do, or just to see what kind of reaction you're going to get when Howard Hughes walks in the room. So we do know he used body doubles that look like him, and we know he had this other gentleman. We also know that there was other names that he used throughout his life too, just to add confusion to his own existence. He couldn't really use Howard Hughes. He couldn't really use that name.
Mm-hmm.
So he found other names of real people. I don't know how he found them, but he found other names of real people, and he would use those at various times throughout his life.
I can kind of see his point in a way, because being so recognizable, I mean, it's hard to go anywhere. It's hard to do anything. And after so many years, you probably get tired of it. To the extent that maybe, I mean, that's why even the regular person gets a vacation house, so they can take off and just in the middle of nowhere and just hang out by a lake or whatever. So nobody, no phone, no light, no motor car, any of that stuff going on. So I mean, I can see it with the stuff that he was doing and being so well known like he was. I can understand it.
And you can see that because the movie stars today, they can never escape. They can never, ever escape. Some of them don't want to, but the ones that would, just there's no way to do it. Someone's always going to recognize them.
Mm-hmm. There's one story I remember from one singer. I'm not going to say who it is. She was out to dinner with her husband or a friend, and there were these people in the back room, and they recognized her. And they said, "Can you come back here? It's my wife's birthday."
Oh my goodness.
She said, "Okay, yeah, I'll do it." So she walked back there with this gentleman, and it's when it hit her that they didn't look upon her as a person; they looked upon her as a thing. Because instead of saying, "Look, I have so and so with me," he says, "Look what I found."
Oh my goodness.
And that's when it hit her, and then she ended up becoming very private in her private life after that, because it didn't. She just thought, well, they're going to look at me as who I am, and I go in there, but no. So I think it's the thing they all go through. I agree with you, and some of them deal with it better than others do. But I don't know if I'd like that. I don't know if I'd like people to recognize. Well, here I am, just doing this. I'm gonna find one to talk, I guess. But to have that kind of fame, And yeah, like I said, I can understand. I like my time at home. COVID was great. I'm one of these people. COVID was great for me because I got to stay home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm more of an introvert anyway. You'd never know it because I do the show, but I'm really more of an introvert, and I enjoy it. And so after COVID, I just kept being an introvert. So I can understand that. I'd be happy up in the mountains somewhere, closed off like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't bother me. So, like I said, I can understand his point of view on it if that's how he felt, where he couldn't even go anywhere. Was he out and about when he was living there? Was he out and about in the community sometimes? I mean, did he go out?
He would go before 1976. He would go into town in Detroit, Alabama. He'd go into town. They would go to lunch. He liked going to the hardware store, the normal stuff. After 1976, he never did that because he never could afford to have been identified.
Sure.
I have heard that with those hotels that he had in Las Vegas, that he would go and intermingle with people in the hotels in disguises.
Mm-hmm.
He'd wear wigs, he'd wear facial hair, things like that as disguises. But he didn't mind going out and interacting with the people,
Mm-hmm.
mingling with the people, as long as there wasn't anything personal associated with it,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they couldn't recognize him.
Mm-hmm.
But he would go out in very, very, drab, sometimes, clothes that had stains on them, and wander around his casinos and enjoy them. I guess I get that would be a way to do it. If I owned a casino, I'd probably enjoy it, and that's what I think he did at that point in time, where he could, in a way that he could do it.
Well, yeah. Then people like with Elvis. I mean, Elvis would rent the roller rink. That was his thing. He'd rent the roller rink or the amusement park all night long, or the movie theater, so that he could go to the movies without being bothered by people. So he can enjoy himself. So it makes a lot of sense. He he had pseudonyms when he traveled. He had fake names
Mm-hmm,
when he
mm-hmm.
get on airplanes and stuff, so people wouldn't know it was him. So I could see, that's cool. Good, good for Hughes if he did this. That's all I can say is good. Good for Hughes.
He found a way to hide.
Yeah.
He just found a way to hide and live the way he wanted to live. And as I said, they lived a very, very frugal life
Mm-hmm.
during that time. But he really wasn't a material man.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't someone who needed a big house, who needed, the big cars and everything. He just wanted to hide, and he found a way to do it.
Well, I mean, and again, a big house and snazzy cars would just bring more attention to him anyway.
Right. That's what people would expect.
Right.
That's the way that he would be expected to live, and so live a total different way, and it fits what he was trying to accomplish at that point in time.
I just wonder why he would pick somebody that was like 20 years older than he was to hide out, or unless that's the only friend of his that said, "Oh, I'll do it," that was it.
Yeah, well, his interaction with the stand-in was rather minimal. See, the way they worked this is he had about 3 aides that helped him,
Mm-hmm.
and there were about 3 aides that helped the stand-in. And then the stand-in started out in Las Vegas, and I think it was late 1970 that they moved the stand-in into the Bahamas and moved him out of Las Vegas, and then moved him over to Nicaragua, up to Canada, back to Nicaragua, to England, back to Bahamas, to Mexico. They just moved him around, just throwing confusion everywhere they went there. And I think the only action that Howard had with them was through the aides
Mm-hmm.
of any direction that they wanted to provide, to buy this or buy that or that type of thing. But I don't think Howard had much actual interaction with the man at all.
Yeah, because it's just odd. He was so much older than he was.
Right. See, and Howard was born in 1905.
Right.
Eva was born in 1916. So they'd have been 10 years apart. And Vernon Isley was born in 1921. So the man that Eva was supposed to have been married to was actually 5 years younger than her.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, the man I was married to was not 5 years younger than me. He was way older than me. And so the age went in there too of fitting, what really went on here. And so the height and the age didn't ever match what Howard really was.
Mm-hmm.
So those things, if you begin to put the story together, those things all help confirm who was this guy and what was he really trying to do.
So what happened after he passed away? I mean, there had to be some kind of. I'm talking about Howard himself. After he passed away, what happened to her? What went on her end? Because obviously he was under an assumed name.
When Howard passed away, he passed away November 2001, and they've lived together now for 31 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Eva, then she was living in Dothan, Alabama, is where Eva was living at that point in time. And that's where I met her, was in that January 2002 timeframe. That's when I met her. And she said, there's something I want to tell you. There's something I want to talk to you about. And then she relayed the story to me. And I just thought, this is crazy.
Right.
But she just pretty much lived by herself on her own in Dothan, Alabama, and then moved to Jacksonville, Florida. She moved to Jacksonville, Florida, which is the place that she died in 2009, was Jacksonville.
Did she inherit any of Howard's money or anything like that that you know of, or did she just end up just living on, as they say?
The only thing she got was a $10,000 insurance policy. That was it.
Wow.
That was it. Richest man in the world.
Yeah,
richest man in America. $10,000 insurance policy. But she was not really a material person either. She really didn't need a lot of money. I guess if you live in the woods of Alabama, you don't need a lot of money. And they had enough money to live on very, very handily.
Right.
And she had some savings put away and so forth like that. So they were, they weren't financially broke, and he could, if he wanted to buy something, he'd just buy it.
And how old was she when she met him?
When she met him, she was about 55 years old.
Okay.
She was born in 1916, and she met him in 1969. So what would that be, 53?
Something like that, yeah.
63.
Something like that.
53. And so she met him then, and then they were married at that point in time. The marriage thing is interesting because in December of 69 and January of 70, they were in Alabama, they were in Panama, and he would just disappear. He just disappeared for 2 months. She didn't know where it was. And he comes back to Panama, and she says, well, where have you been? And he said, well, I had some business to attend to in the States. Now, Eva is smart enough to know when to quit asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then in March of 70, he took her to the nicest jewelry store in Panama. The nicest jewelry store in Panama, and bought her a 2-carat diamond ring. They're now engaged. Shortly after that, he says, I need you to sign everything that I need to sign. Here's my name. And she practiced Vernon Isley. And she practiced Vernon Isley. And from there, for the next 31 years, she signed everything he needed to sign. Then they were married then in May of 1970 in Alabama. The aides were all interacting with him through all that period of time there. Mm-hmm. And then they just stayed there. She said he would go out and do his work at night. He'd always be gone at night. And if you read the books on Howard Hughes, that's when all of his communications was in the middle of the night. If someone needed to be called, the communication went in the middle of the night. So all of those things matched. And then they left Alabama in June of 70. And Eva left him. Eva was ready to be done with him because she had a hard time living with him. So she went to Flagstaff, Alabama, just to kind of get away from him, and hoping that he'd just disappear. Well, he didn't. He now shows up in Flagstaff in July of 72. They were gone for 6 weeks or so. And I asked Eva, I said, Eva, do you know what happened in June of 72? And she said, no, I don't know. I said, Watergate. So if you put the pieces of Watergate together, what you end up with is, you remember Liddy and Hunt, who got arrested for Watergate? They're caught in the Watergate building.
Yeah.
They were working for a guy named Robert Bennett, who worked for Howard Hughes. The office they went into was a gentleman named Larry O'Brien, who was also on the Howard Hughes payroll. So in essence, what you have is Howard Hughes people going to an office controlled by Howard Hughes, and it does Nixon in. So why would Hughes want to do Nixon in? Hughes wanted Nixon to stop doing nuclear testing in Nevada. It's his backyard. He didn't want nuclear testing going on in Nevada, and he was a germaphobe. So this was not wise. So if you look at the timing of a nuclear test in Nevada in September of 69, it's exactly the same time that Howard shows up in Panama. Exactly the same time. Now, also, H.R. Halterman wrote a book that talked about, remember that 18.5-minute lapse in the tapes, Richard Nixon's tapes that were just blank? According to H.R. Halterman, that was the Howard Hughes connection to Watergate. That's why it could never, ever, ever come out. That's why that had to disappear. Because you didn't want the Howard Hughes connection to Watergate. And then in 1974, the Watergate Investigative Committee went to Howard Hughes and said, we'd like to talk to you about Watergate. Of course, Howard right now is supposedly this, long-haired, long fingernailed, mentally incompetent, drug-addicted derelict.
Right.
His response is, I'll be happy to talk to you about Watergate, but I'm going to make known to the public everything I've ever done for the CIA, and you're not going to like it. It was dropped. It was all dropped. And that all happened at a time in there when Eva and Nick were separated.
Wow. There's just so many twists here.
There's little bits and pieces that just fit together in here like a glove. Eva said they're in Arizona. Let me get the year right. This was late 72, I think. Late 72. And Howard was just elated. He was just on top of the world. Just absolutely happiest she'd ever seen him. Happiest she'd ever seen him. And she didn't know what was going on. So I began to research December 72. What happened December 72? Well, at that point in time in 72, Howard was supposed to pay a fine that he had in one of his businesses. I think it was associated with TWA. And he was supposed to pay $152 million settlement. And all of a sudden in December 72, that was absolved. That was resolved. He did not now owe $152 million that he was expecting to have to pay. And I told Eva, that would make you pretty happy if that was the case in your life, if you just learned that I was expecting to pay $152 million and I don't have to pay a penny of it.
That definitely would make me happy.
Yeah, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
So, personality wise, when he was with her, like you say, he could be very demanding with her. He could, but he could be very sweet at the same time. When she first met him, what was he like?
He was very in charge. He was a very impressive man,
Hmm.
tall, handsome, in charge. Obviously, had a lot of influence if he had these aides around him all the time. And so Eva kind of resembled. She had a slight resemblance to Elizabeth Taylor, and so there's some physical attraction here also. I think it was 1948 that Howard went to Elizabeth Taylor's mother and said, "I'll pay you $1 million if you let me marry Elizabeth." And when Elizabeth heard that, she just laughed. She just laughed at it. But Howard had this thing for Elizabeth Taylor, and now Eva somewhat has a resemblance there. And so they got together. They just enjoyed each other's company. She probably didn't ever, well, she knew when to quit asking questions with him.
Hmm.
She knew how far to go and when to stop thing. And he probably respected that, and he probably liked that. But they just enjoyed. They just kind of enjoyed each other's person. They traveled a little bit there in Panama, traveled around, saw some of the sights there in Panama, and enjoyed their time there. And then later on went to Arizona. But she found him, very personal. I found her very personable,
Hmm.
and her memory was just instant. She never ever forgot anything. And even when I would ask her questions about certain times and certain episodes in their lives, everything would be exactly the same. Even words, she said, he said this, I said this, even the words would
Hmm.
be the exact same thing. One time she was telling me about an episode, and I said, Eva, when did this happen? And she said, and I was expecting like, oh, it was April of 74. That's all I was looking at. And she said, it was just before noon on a Saturday. So
Wow.
her mind was always there. And we were asking her questions, 2 weeks prior to her passing. She died in November of 2009.
Hmm.
And we were asking her questions up into 2 weeks of that. And she was just answering them like she'd answered them, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years earlier.
Hmm.
Everything was instant there in her mind. She was that good. People say she must have had dementia. She must have had Alzheimer's. No, not a bit. Not one bit.
The story is just so incredible. How long did it take you to research it and and put it together?
Well, I started hearing it in 2002, and I didn't believe it. And then as I visited with her, and the story never changed,
Hmm.
I started going back and researching it and found out, well, it's kind of what she's telling me. Everything's what she's telling me. And then I actually came to the conclusion in 2006 that this is true. What she's telling me is absolutely right on true. And so started putting the story together at that point in time. I read it to her 3 times
Hmm.
because she wanted everything accurate. I wanted everything accurate. I didn't want any Hollywood in it, and she didn't want any Hollywood in it. And there was one time I read it to her, and this was the second time I read it to her, and she said, "Now you messed this up last time. I told you how to correct it. You didn't correct it. Get it right this time." And so she told me exactly what she wanted, and it was what she told me before. I just didn't get it in the manuscript.
Huh. Wow. So
But
did
we
you have?
she wanted to make sure everything was totally accurate in it and correct. And so whenever we speculated, we're saying that in there.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we wanted everything to be totally accurate. We put the first book out in 2010.
Hmm.
She did not want it to come out until after she had passed away. So we put it out 2010, and then more information started coming up, more and more. I went back to Alabama, and people started telling me more things, and people started making contact with us. Children started making contact with us. We started hearing these things. I expected someone to come to me and say, Musick, you stupid idiot. This is not true because A, B, C, and D. This is totally false. Nobody ever did that. Nobody did that. Everybody kept saying yes. And oh, by the way, I had this interaction with them. And it all makes sense now. It never made sense before, but it all makes sense now of what they were really doing.
The
Then after the
research,
second book was put out in 2016, we then have gotten more information come forward.
well, again, the research, like when you say you were looking at stuff and comparing dates and all this, I mean, that must have taken a lot of time. They have to put that, figure all that out, put that together.
And what I tried to do is read. Eva was telling me her story about Howard Hughes, and then I was trying to read every book I could get on Howard Hughes
Mm-hmm.
to say how does all this fit? How did he do this? And what I found out, a lot of the books on Howard Hughes never go into his later life. They just skip it because they can never explain it. So
Mm-hmm.
they just ignore his later life, which is probably a good move because you couldn't explain it. You could never reasonably say this is what happened to Howard, going from a commanding, charming man to a long-haired, long fingernail, derelict, mentally incompetent, 100-pound, guy.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't make any sense to go between those two.
Absolutely. Mr. Musick, I want to thank you for coming. Oh my gosh, this was terrific. And it's still, my head is still spinning about this, but what's next for you?
Oh, we're still getting some information on this story. There's been other children that have come forward and talking about their stories. There's been various people come forward and say, "Did you know this? Did you know that situation?" And kind of just adding to the story. So it's kind of like still collecting these things, these bits and pieces of information, and then trying to figure out a way to keep them all going when we need them.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on. I so appreciate it. I'd love to have you on again to talk more about this. This is incredible. It's just, I can understand him doing it, but it's still hard to wrap my head around. I'm really gonna have to think about this now. So you got me thinking.
It's very hard to get your head around. That's right. Charlotte, thank you very much for this interview. I appreciate it. This was great.
All right. Love to have you on again, sir.
Sounds good.
You have a good one.
You also.
Okay, bye-bye. All right. That was really cool. And yeah, who knows? People that have money can do pretty much what they want if they decide they want to, if they decide they want to disappear. And I'm saying it could, like all these sightings of Elvis. I mean, who knows, right? So yeah, I agree, Marisa. That was pretty mind blowing. And yeah, I'm gonna have to sit back and really drink a cool one and think about that one. Tomorrow, Nancy Matz is going to be here, and we're going to call them now Nancy Fridays is what we're going to be doing because she's going to be here every Friday, and we're going to be talking about past lives. We're going to be talking about children, that talk about their past lives and stuff. So that should be interesting tomorrow, and that's going to be our usual time at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Again, if you guys are interested in that Ghost Hunting 101 class, that'll be Saturday at 11 a.m. Check out the California Haunts Meetup. Also, I'm going to be teaching a psychic development class, level 1 class on the 28th, and that's going to be also at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. And that's going to teach you how to open and close that psychic door and meet your spirit guides and and you can meet your health guides and straighten out your chakras and do all that good stuff. If you're interested in that, check out the California Haunts Meetup. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show tonight, share it with 5 people. We're equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. Also, if you're watching from YouTube, please subscribe. There's that little guy down in the bottom right-hand corner, with the Sherlock Holmes hat on and the magnifying glass. That's our mascot. And we want to keep adding to our subscribers and all that. But again, I want to thank you guys for coming on. And check out the website at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. All our videos are there. There's links. Sometimes it's hard to find our YouTube site. The easiest way to find that is to go over to the radio site and click on the video that's on the front, and that'll take you in. Or you go up and check out our archives. We got all the archives We have more than 240 videos that we've done the last year and a half, plus some of our Blog Talk Radio videos are there, or audio is there as well. And if you want to listen to the show again, or you want to listen to past shows, and you're driving around in your car or whatever, and you don't want to have to look at my face, hey, that's cool too. We also are on Apple, all the podcast stuff, Apple, Google, and all those places. You can check us out there, or check us out at rss.com, California Haunts, because we're there as well. But I want to thank you guys, and it's that time of the night when you see that thing flashing along the bottom of the screen. That's there because California Haunts takes no money to do their investigations, to do our investigations. Everything is based on donation. So just like with the radio show, all the bills that come of this, whether it's internet or computer breaks or lights go out or my headphones commit to it, my headphones die or the mics die, that comes out of my pocket, and I could always use some help with some of that. So if you can find it in your heart to donate, because I love doing this. I'm a journalist. And this is what I like to do. This is my thing. I'm a retired journalist. So you could donate at paypal.me at California Haunts. Or if you don't like PayPal, you'd rather use Venmo, just as easy. Go to Venmo, type in California Haunts. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming. And I've got a link to where you can get this gentleman's book and his website. Because I forgot to ask him about that in my infinite wisdom. So here we go. Website is boxeshowardhughessecrets.com. And the book is Boxes: The Secret Life of Howard Hughes. And you can either get that book at his website or at Amazon.com. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I will see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a good one.